Okay, we'll do this little kind of introduction and what we're all here for. We're starting off with kind of this first slide of using WebEx. So I will say that I am not great with WebEx, but hopefully this will help with a few pointers. To the right-hand part of the screen at the bottom, there is a chat box. Again, that's kind of right in here in this little tiny picture, but the chat box, if you have any questions or things throughout the presentation, if you can add your questions to the chat, that would be great. We'll be kind of monitoring them and we'll try to address some of them throughout the presentation, but because of the materials, there's maybe some that we kind of skip through a little bit until we get through most of the slides, and then we'll come back and make sure that we've addressed all the questions. And then there is the kind of hand button. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry about that. There is a hand button on here, so if you want to raise your hand, we'll be taking more questions at the end where you can raise your hand, and then we'll kind of unmute you, and then you can talk for some of those questions at the end. But if you want to go ahead and skip to the next slide, Madeline, perfect. So this is the presentation about the Oregon Building Performance Standards program, and it's basically focused on schools. So I'm here just because I know most of you, and I'm with I'm the schools program lead with the Public Purpose Charged Schools program. And well, I should say Christy Spoon. If you haven't met me before, I think I've talked to everybody, but anyways, and then I'll let Madeline and Ken introduce themselves.
Great. Thank you, Christy. Hi, I'm Madeline O'Dwyer. I'm also from the Oregon Department of Energy, where I work in codes and standards, and I primarily focus on the BPS program.
Hi, everybody. Ken Davies, program analyst. Same thing. Oregon Department of Energy, Codes and Standards, Building Performance Standard. Glad to be here. Glad to have you with us.
Before we get into the material, I just want to reiterate something that Christy had said. First, this is being recorded, so this is going to be posted online for your reference after the presentation today. Because it's being recorded, please go ahead and put your questions into the chat, but we will address them all at the end. With that, I'll get started. So today we're here to talk about the Oregon Building Performance Standard. You'll hear me use the acronym BPS to refer to the program. This slide's just about some history, the origins, how long we've had this on our radar. So in 2023, it was the Oregon legislation that passed House Bill 3409 that created this standard for commercial buildings. The main idea for the standard is that it is going to be used to address energy use and emissions from existing commercial buildings. And it's all about enhancing energy management practices and implementing energy efficiency measures. In 2024, we went through rulemaking, and at the end of 2024, we published the official Oregon version of the ASHRAE 100 standard, which has become now the BPS. Compliance deadlines, and we'll get onto this in the next slide too, but compliance deadlines start as soon as June 1st, 2028. So we know that in calendar time, that's pretty far away, but in projects and kind of the logistics of how to create projects, it can seem a little daunting. So let's go into first, I'll invite Christy back on to the screen and talk a little bit about the differences between BPS and the project that she leads, SB 1149.
Yeah. So a number of the school districts you guys that have joined have probably already heard of the Public Purpose Charge or Senate Bill 1149 Schools program. For those of you that haven't heard of it, I've got another page down in the presentation with some additional resources, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between the Public Purpose Charge or Senate Bill 1149 Schools program from the BPS kind of program, so that you just understand a few of those slight differences. So the 1149 program is kindergarten through 12th grade public schools. So again, your educational structures between the kindergarten and 12th grade levels within PGE and Pacific Power Territory. So again, those are going to be those schools in those 2 electric territories. For building performance standards, again, it's going to be school buildings over 35,000 square feet, and it's going to be looking at pre-K, public, private, charters, et cetera. And there's going to be more information, lots more information about BPS. For 1149 program, the buildings have to be owned by the school district. And again, for BPS, it's commercial buildings, regardless of the ownership. And then we'll get into the types of buildings and all that kind of stuff. Again, for 1149, only the educational structures, those elementary school, middle school, and high schools are considered eligible. So the admin buildings, the bus barns, the shops, those buildings are not eligible for the 1149 program unless, like some admin buildings, that might be used kind of 50% or more by students. And then again, BPS, there's a number of other building types that they include, but again, for those other building types, those are part of that BPS program. And again, Madeline will get into some of the differences between the tiers and the square footage.
Why don't we just do that right now? Don't want to leave you all hanging. So this slide's all about what buildings are covered by the building performance standard. The building performance standard is separated into tiers, and then those tiers are then further separated into compliance states. For the majority of buildings in the school ecosystem, we're looking at the right side of this graphic. The right side of this graphic covers our special tier 2 buildings. You'll see a whole list of building use types on the top of that right-hand side of the screen that shows what falls into special tier 2. But for the purposes of our conversation today, we're talking about schools, universities, and dormitories. In order to be eligible or covered by the BPS program, these types of buildings must be at minimum 35,000 square feet or larger. So a elementary school that is 18,000 square feet would not be covered. And so that's your first tier that you should know of. It's called Special Tier 2. The compliance date for this tier is July 1st of 2028. And in the next slides, we'll go over what compliance means, but just bear with me for a second. On the left-hand side of this graphic is the other types of buildings that are covered under this program. That includes non-residential, hotel, and motels. Those are the building types, and then you'll see that the graphic is then split into a couple colors. For regular tier 2, this is buildings between 20,000 and 35,000 square feet that are non-residential, hotel, motel, and don't fall into the special category. This is where your admin building might pop up. So admin buildings between 20 and 35,000 square feet, bus barns between 20 and 35,000 square feet are going to be regular tier 2. They still have that same compliance date of July 1st, 2028. When we get into tier 1, we get into some more strict requirements, and now we have 3 compliance states. The compliance states are all based on square footage, and the biggest of the tier 1 buildings will have to comply first. So our first compliance date for tier 1 buildings is going to be June 1st of 2028. So that's a month earlier than either tier 2 buildings. So that's for 200,000 square feet or above. The next date is a year after, in June 1st of 2029, for buildings between 90,000 and 200,000 square feet. And finally, our last compliance date in the next 5 years is June 1st of 2030. And those are the tier 1 buildings between 35,000 square feet and 90,000 square feet. So your compliance date is going to be determined by 2 things: your building use type and how big that building is. Now that we've talked about tiers, let's put it into perspective and go through a couple of questions, some examples using three main questions. What is the building type? What is the square footage? And then that will help us determine the tier. So an elementary school that's 25,000 square feet is not covered. Elementary school means that it's going to be in that special tier 2, and special tier 2's threshold begins at 35,000 square feet. A middle school at 40,000 square feet would then be tier 2. A bus barn at 25,000 square feet is also tier 2. It's a regular tier 2 building, so it would be on this left-hand side of the screen because it's non-residential. And because it's over that 20,000 square foot threshold, it's considered tier 2. A district facilities shop at 37,000 square feet. So district facilities, what's the building type? It is non-residential. The size is 37,000, which is over our tier 1 35,000 square feet threshold, making this building a tier 1. The next two examples are examples of mixed use buildings, and we'll have a couple more examples later on in the presentation. So if this doesn't make sense right now, that's a-okay. We're going to go through some more examples and talk through it a bit more in a couple slides. The first example of mixed use is an admin building that is 65% used for admin and 35,000 square feet, 35% used for students. It's a 40,000 square foot building, which makes this one tier 2. We'll go into more about admin buildings and how that adjusts the tiers later in the presentation as well. This last example is a district pool building that's not on a campus of a school, but is used mostly by students with some community use. Its size is 35,000 square feet. So our building use type here is a swimming pool. Our square footage is 35,000 square feet. So this means that it could be either tier 1 or tier 2, depending on who it's being used by. It's going to be tier 2 if it's owned by the school and is justified for student use. Whereas if it's community owned and operated, this building would be a tier 1 building. Okay, I've been saying all these tiers, I've been throwing out compliance dates, but what does that mean? What is each building what standard is it going to be held towards? Regardless if it's a tier 1 or tier 2 building, all buildings need to do two things. Find the EUIT, so find the energy use intensity target based on the building use type, activity type, climate zone, and occupancy. So in our standard, we have a list of targets per building. Ken will go into this a little later, but at least 50% of all buildings in each use type should be hitting their target as is. Once you find your energy use intensity target, you also need to calculate your energy use intensity. So Ken will go through this a little bit more on how you can do that using information you already have. So for tier 1 and tier 2 buildings, they need to identify what their target is, and they need to calculate their EUI. Now for tier 2, you're done. But tier 1, like I said, has some stricter requirements. So tier 1 buildings need to also attest to an operations and maintenance program, as well as an energy management plan. And if and only if their EUI is worse than the target, they will then need to get an energy audit and work to reduce their energy use. In just a few slides, I'll go through some of those alternative compliance pathways if the building continues to stay above its EUI target. I just wanted to mention quickly about exemptions. There are a few exemptions for the BPS program. It should be noted that exemptions are not automatic. They must be applied for. They are available for manufacturing, industrial, and agricultural buildings. But more relevant to you all is this no certificate of occupancy, less than 50% physical occupancy, and large amounts of unconditioned floor area. So if we're thinking about that bus barn again, if maybe it's lit, but there's no HVAC system, it's standing alone from the school, not on the same energy pumps, there could be a way for this building to be exempt from the program. The last exemption category is financial hardship, and we'll have a whole criteria of what that means available on our website. On the right-hand side, there's just a small note about historic buildings. So if your school is registered as a historic building with the state, you are still not exempt from this program, but there is a caveat that you being the building, the historic building, does not need to install any energy efficiency measures that might compromise the historical integrity of the building. Now we know that schools lend itself pretty easily to campuses, having these groups of buildings. I'm going to go through a couple of definitions for what it means to be a grouped building, and then we'll go through an example. So there are three main definitions on this slide: connected building, campus, and grouped buildings. Connected buildings, when you hear us say this phrase, it's going to mean anything. It's going to mean buildings with shared energy meters on contiguous property. Contiguous means that they're sharing a border, that they're right next to each other. A campus would be a collection of buildings all served by district heating and cooling, water or power systems. And this campus needs to be owned by the same building owner in order for it to be labeled as a campus. And finally, grouped buildings is a set of tier 1 or tier 2 buildings that comply at the connected or campus level. So if we go into an example, we'll see that the example on the screen here is about Western Oregon University. It talks about how there's 13 buildings on this campus and it's all on shared energy metering. This means that since they are on shared metering and they're owned by the same owner, they will be applying as a connected campus. The way or the difference between applying as a connected campus or as a single building comes into which forms you submit. So if you are a single building, you would submit application form A, whereas you can see on the top of the screen, as a grouped building, you would be submitting form G for grouped application. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you. We're going to go through 3 examples and answer these 4 questions at the bottom for each one. So in this example, there is an elementary, a middle, and a high school building all on the same campus with 5 total buildings, and 2 of these which are over 35,000 square feet. So the 5 total buildings have 3 electric meters that serve the buildings. Is this a grouped building, or can they apply as a grouped building? If they were able to parse out the 2 buildings that are over 35,000 square feet, they would not need to apply as a group building. They could do it as 2 separate tier 2 buildings. However, if you are unable to parse out the buildings between the energy metering, then they would have to apply as a group building. They would be tier 2 because they are special tier 2. They're in that schools category. If they're tier 2, their compliance date is July 1st, 2028. And then the question is, do they need to hit any energy targets? No, they just need to identify what their energy target is. In this next example, a high school and a middle school campus has 3 buildings, but each building has its own electric meter and each building has its own heating system. The main high school is 40,000 square feet and the middle school is 35,000 square feet. Because each of these buildings have their own energy and heating meters, this would not be a group building. Because they are in that school category, they would be a tier 2. That means their compliance date is just like the last one, July 1st of 2028, and they would not need to meet any energy use intensity targets. Lastly, a middle school and admin building are on the same campus and share an electric meter. The middle school is 35,000 square feet and the admin building is 37,000 square feet. So if we just looked at the original graphic I showed with the two buildings, the middle school at 35,000 square feet would be in that special tier 2 category. The admin, because it's over that 35,000 square feet threshold, would be a tier 1 building. However, these two buildings are on the same campus and they share an electric meter. This means that the privileges of being a tier 2 is also given to the admin building. So this would be a grouped building. It would be a tier 2 grouped building. And then the last two questions are going to be the same. When's the compliance date? July 1st of 2028. And do they need to meet the energy target compliance? And the answer is no. For my last slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about compliance and what happens if your tier 1 building is not going to reach compliance. Just as a quick reminder before we get lost in all of this text, compliance means for a tier 2 building that you identify your EUI target and you benchmark your data. So you know what your EUI is for your building. For tier 1, it's those two things plus an O&M program, an EMP, and that you're hitting your compliance targets. So the easiest thing on paper, because we know nothing is easy, but the easiest thing on paper to meet your compliance is to just check off each step. If you're able to benchmark and reach your target and submit all those plans, congratulations, you're done. However, this is not always possible. And so there are 3 options available for buildings, for tier 1 buildings that will not meet their compliance target. The 3 options are conditional compliance, the investment criteria, and the investment criteria through conditional compliance. Conditional compliance means that you know that you're not going to meet your target. You do a level 2 ASHRAE level 2 energy audit. You get a list of energy efficiency measures and you implement those efficiency measures before your compliance date. So in theory, your building should now be at target, you just don't have the data. Before we go any further, when we say data, what we mean is 12 consecutive months within a 2-year period of your compliance date. So if you're able to get all of the energy efficiency measures implemented, but it's 6 months before your compliance date, well, you're not going to have the data, and that's okay. You just need to let us know, and we will give you, or we'll give the building a conditional compliance. Because it will be at target, it's just going to be at target after the deadline. The second alternative compliance pathway is the investment criteria. Now, this, like our other example, in this case, you are not going to meet the target. You do your ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, and you get your list of EEMs. If you're this pathway is used when the building is not expected to reach its energy target, or its EUI cannot be determined due to the unavailability of energy use data. So in the investment criteria, you do all your EEMs, but you're still not going to reach your target. Some buildings, there's a limit. We understand that. You can't push a building further than it's able to go. However, in this pathway, what you're doing is you're saying, I recognize that my building needs to be more energy efficient, and now I've done everything I can to make it so. The last one is investment criteria through conditional compliance. Same few steps as our first two, right? Your building does not meet the target. You do that ASHRAE level 2 energy audit. You get a list of EEMs. In this case, you are able to reach your target, but you've implemented the energy efficiency measures past your compliance date. So the good news is you've reached your target and you're in compliance. The bad news is just took a little longer. That's okay. We're willing to work with you, and that's our big takeaway here is that no matter where your building is, we just want your participation and we want a conversation, and we will come up together with the best plan forward. I'm going to pass it off now to Ken, who in this case is going to play the bad cop to my good cop.
Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, cue the Law and Order music because we're going to talk about civil penalties. But this is really like the last step in a process that would, in theory, have gone terribly awry. So, just to reiterate Madeline's last slide, there's lots of ways to keep your foot in the compliance side of the in the door and avoid all this. The legislation did, though, provide for penalties to be assessed on Tier 1 buildings that haven't complied with the standard. Those are capped at a maximum of $5,000 per year plus $1 per square foot of gross floor area per year, based on the duration of any continuing violation. So let's say you had a 100,000 square foot building. That's 105,000 for that first year if you don't get the compliance under control, and then that could continue on from there. Each compliance period is for 5 years, so you have time to get the course corrected if things aren't going well. We will notify the building owner and follow all the procedures that have been outlined in the standard if we're getting to that point. But we think you got this. Next slide. Okay, a little more on energy targets. That's how we compare like buildings to like buildings, apples to apples, schools to schools, all that good stuff. There are over 100 different building energy use intensity targets identified. Those have all been normalized for either of the 2 climate zones in Oregon, basically east and west of the Cascades. They're also normalized for the type of operation in terms of staff and hours that you're open and things like that. So energy use intensity is, you're going to take, in almost every case, the gas and electric consumption for that building. If you have any other kind of fuels that are used to power the building, then those would be included too. But we're going to take those, convert them to thousands of BTUs, and divide it by the square footage of the building, and that's how you get an EUI. And we have plenty of guidance documents that can help you learn how to figure that out. You could calculate that energy consumption by going back and taking a bunch of hard copy billing statements and things like that. And you could do that if you're behind the game a little bit and need to do some catching up, or you can get yourself hooked up with the EPA's free online tool. It's called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It's a free software. We just had good news this past week that Congress has passed funding for that. So that funds things like your Energy Star rankings or ratings on washing machines and refrigerators and stuff like that. But also this portfolio manager, which you just basically you connect your utility account numbers to that, and portfolio manager begins to monitor that data and aggregate that for you. And if you want it totaled out by EUI, it's going to do that for you as well. Energy use intensity target, like I said, there's over 100 of those identified already. Those are based on national and regional data. They're already established in our standard, but we have a handy tool on our website that will help you locate the target that applies to your building. Just going to go on there and fill out some of that information, and it's going to get you to the number you're looking for. Next slide, please. Again, this is, we kind of covered this a little bit. You can do this the hard way from old billing statements or collect those as you go. If you have a tenant situation, you may need to ask for that information from them. You can get that information released from your utility. And in some cases, you may find it's worth it to install sub-meters so that you can collect that in a kind of a subdivided space. If you don't have any of that energy use information, then the building will be treated as though they are not meeting their energy targets, and then they would be kind of going down the road of non-compliance. So no penalties on the tier 2 buildings for non-compliance, but you would be considered that. And I think the important thing to focus on is the program is really about gathering data, and that data is going to help inform the program going forward. So it's good for us to have data on the building energy consumption and make informed decisions about programmatic rules going forward. Okay, I'm going to bring Christy in for this next slide real quick.
Okay, so for the school districts that are part of the Public Purpose Charged Schools program, again, you guys have been reporting energy usage data like already for a number of years. So again, some of this we really kind of just wanted to reiterate here that our program will be working to align some aspects of our program to BPS where it's feasible, such as like the EY targets. There might be slight differences, but we're going to work to align them for our program to the BPS kind of EY targets for those educational structures. And then again, for energy usage reporting, we're just going to be working with school districts over the next year to kind of figure out, you know, again, just that the reporting for our program is in the school's interactive database. But again, we'll be working to kind of help figure out if you want to kind of move that direction for building the portfolio manager software. And, you know, or if you're just going to be, you know, reviewing bills for BPS and then maybe you don't need to switch. But either way, we'll be working with you to kind of align as much as possible for our program to kind of the BPS program aspects. And then there's just a couple links on this slide for the Public Purpose Charged Schools program kind of webpage in case any of you are not sure about that program and you want a little more information. And also the list of eligible 1149 schools. So again, if for some reason you're not sure, there's the list on our website just to take a glance at. But again, we'll be working with school districts in the Public Purpose Charge program over the next year around the energy reporting aspects. So thank you.
Thanks, Christy. On our website, we have lots of guidance documents to help you. If for some reason this webinar has not provided every answer, which I'm pretty sure it has, you can find more answers here. You could start with something like BPS basics, tier 1 and tier 2 compliance, the energy use intensity, calculating that, finding the target, all those good things that we've talked about already. Those are all up on the website, and we're starting to build a video webinar library, which will include this one. So keep checking back to the website. Lots of good info up there. Next, please. What should you be doing now? So if you individually or as a district, for example, received one of our notices in the mail, there's instructions on that sheet about what to do. You would go into our property inventory list online. You would create an account, enter your unique building identification number, which is your UBID, and then start to look at the information on that building file. Make sure the square footage is correct, the building activity type is correct, contact information, all that good stuff. It's going to ask about square footage, utility billing data for the entire building, and then you're just going to verify all that. And once it's looking good, you're going to hit submit, and then that'll get reviewed on our side and kind of officially entered into our inventory. Pass on the energy professional stuff. We're going to talk about that quite a bit here coming up. Next, please. Compliance dates. They don't begin until June of 28. So you're looking at about 2.5 years right now to get all this going. In terms of staff work, we are continuing to gather and refine the information on the commercial buildings in Oregon that fall under the program. We sent out over 30,000 letters in late June. Some of those went into the ether and circled around and came back to us. And so we sent out another batch. And now we feel like we finally got a handle on who we are supposed to be in touch with. Incentives we'll talk about a little bit here, but the incentive rulemaking was completed and the first cycle of one of the funding opportunities has been completed. We talked about the guidance documents, and we are just getting started on standing up our compliance portal, which is going to hopefully make things a lot more streamlined for building owners to submit their information. It's going to help building owners track that information in terms of what they still need to do. And it probably is going to give you some graphical interfaces that show you how your building is doing compared to others and where you have opportunities to get even better. Next, please. Energy professionals. So for the most part, energy professionals are needed to oversee BPS submittals when we're talking about Tier 1 buildings. Tier 2 needs a qualified energy manager, which can just be perhaps somebody in your facilities group that has managed the HVAC systems, the building systems for 2 years. They don't have to have an additional certification or title to go with that, just the experience there. And here you can see kind of a difference between that Tier 1 and Tier 2 building column in terms of what is required to submit those forms into the BPS portal. So qualified person will outline what those requirements are on a slide coming up here. Qualified energy manager, we talked about. Qualified person, let's move ahead because I think, yeah, here we get to the nitty gritty of those requirements. So we're looking for those Tier 1 buildings, somebody with a professional architect or engineer license, qualified as an energy auditor, certified energy manager. There's a list here. We have a guidance document on this subject on our website. And if you're looking for somebody like that and don't think you have that available in-house, we also have a list on our website of those energy professionals, and they are the Department of Energy isn't able to recommend them necessarily, but they have been vetted by us to make sure they do have those certifications and requirements to do that work. Next, please. This is just some detail on what a qualified energy auditor must perform, what their professional experience looks like, and what their certification requirements are. Next, please. Incentives. As I mentioned, we have some money to help with your compliance efforts. The state-funded program, which is called ECAP, had its first round of or its first opportunity for funding close in mid-December. That's probably going to have one more opportunity for funding through that program. But on the near horizon now is the federally funded program that will incentivize early compliance. We'll probably have 2 to 3 funding rounds under this. It goes to Tier 1 and Tier 2 buildings. Tier 2, typically a little bit less because the requirement is just for energy benchmarking and not the additional energy efficiency measures. And then I should mention too that both of these are kind of geared towards the buildings that are on the end of the spectrum that needs more help. So their buildings are maybe older, in need of more work. And so when you apply for the programs, that kind of comes out in that process. Next, please. Oh, we're done. Well, okay, questions.